The whispers started the moment Raina Thomas walked into the police academy, a black woman daring to enter their world. The men exchanged knowing glances. She wouldn't last a week. When Cole Ramsey loudly joked about her serving coffee instead of wearing a badge, laughter rippled through the room. They saw only what they wanted to see, an outsider, a quota higher. What they missed was the quiet steel in her eyes, the dog tags hidden beneath her collar, and the promise she'd made over her brother's grave. They had no idea she'd spent years mastering judo while working hospital night shifts. By tomorrow's combat drills, they'd learn exactly who they had underestimated. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the State Police Academy. Raina Thomas pulled her modest sedan into a space, put it in park, and sat motionless for a moment. She closed her eyes, fingers instinctively finding the dog tags hanging from her neck. The cool metal against her skin was grounding. "Today's the day, Kyle," she whispered. At 29, Raina knew she was older than most of the recruits who would be starting today. Her lean frame and composed demeanor belied the storm of emotions swirling inside her. After taking one last deep breath, she grabbed her duffel bag from the passenger seat and made her way toward the imposing brick building. The sign-in area bustled with activity. Young men and women, most in their early 20s, gathered in clusters, their nervous energy palpable. Raina stood out immediately, not just as one of the few black women in the room, but also in her quiet solitude. She approached the registration table with measured steps. "Name?" asked the administrator without looking up. "Raina Thomas." The woman's eyes flicked up, surprise evident in her expression. "Thomas, are you sure you're in the right place?" "This is Police Academy registration." Raina nodded once. "I'm in the right place." A few feet away, a group of male recruits had noticed the exchange. One of them, tall with broad shoulders and a smug expression, sauntered over. His name tag read, Cole Ramsey. "You here to hand out water bottles?" Cole asked, his voice dripping with mock innocence. The question drew snickers from his circle of friends. Raina didn't flinch. She simply signed her name on the registration form, collected her information packet, and walked past them without a word. The laughter followed her like an unwanted shadow. As she found a seat in the back corner of the orientation room, Raina's mind drifted to 3 weeks earlier. She had been standing in the hospital break room, removing her name tag after her final shift as an orderly. 6 years she'd spent there, lifting patients, changing sheets, enduring the occasional verbal abuse. It paid the bills, but each day it felt like treading water. That night, she'd gone home to her small apartment and opened the box she kept under her bed. Inside were Kyle's things, his dress uniform, folded with military precision, a handful of photographs, his dog tags, and a letter he'd written her to be opened only if something happened to him. Something had. Kyle had always told her she should join the force. "You've got the heart for it, Rye," he'd say, "and God knows they need people like you." She'd always laugh it off, but after his death, those words had taken on new weight. The orientation room suddenly fell silent as the door swung open. A woman in her 40s with salt and pepper hair cropped short strode in. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture rigid. "I'm Sergeant Lisa Brent," she announced, her voice filling the room without her having to raise it. "For the next 16 weeks, I will be your primary instructor, your worst nightmare, and possibly, if you earn it, your most valuable ally." Brent's eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly when they landed on Raina. A flicker of something, skepticism perhaps, crossed her features before she continued. "Look around you. Statistically speaking, 30% of you won't make it through this program. Another 20% will quit the force within 2 years. Her gaze hardened. My job is to make sure those who do make it are worthy of the bop and edge. For the next hour, Sergeant Brent outlined the program's structure, expectations, and rules. When she finished, she announced the first order of business: partner selection. You will work with your assigned partner for the next 4 weeks. Brent explained. Choose wisely. Your success often depends on theirs. The room erupted into motion as recruits scrambled to pair up with friends or those who looked physically capable. Reyna remained seated, watching as pairs formed around her. No one approached her. A few even made eye contact before quickly looking away. Just as Reyna resigned herself to being the odd one out, a young man hesitantly approached her desk. He was shorter than most of the male recruits, with a lean build and thoughtful eyes. "Hey, I'm Eric Liu," he said, extending his hand. "Looks like we're the last ones standing. Partners?" Reyna assessed him briefly before accepting his handshake. "Reyna Thomas," Eric nodded, seemingly relieved. "Good to meet you, Reyna." Their first physical test came that afternoon, a 5-mile run around the academy grounds. The recruits lined up at the starting point, some bouncing on the balls of their feet, others stretching dramatically. Cole Ramsey stood near the front, rolling his shoulders and shooting confident looks at his friends. "This isn't just about speed," Sergeant Brent called out. "It's about endurance. Pace yourselves." When the whistle blew, several recruits, Cole among them, shot forward like sprinters. Reyna, meanwhile, settled into a steady rhythm. Eric tried to keep pace with her, but fell behind after the second mile. By mile 4, the field had spread out considerably. Many of those who had started too fast were now walking, hands on their knees. Reyna maintained her pace, her breathing controlled, her form efficient. She passed Cole, who was now red-faced and gasping. Reyna crossed the finish, lined 5th overall behind 3 men and 1 woman. Sergeant Brent marked her time without comment, but her raised eyebrow spoke volumes. As the sun began to set, the female recruits gathered in the locker room to shower and change. Reyna kept to herself, taking a shower stall at the far end. But the walls couldn't block out the whispers. "How'd she finish so fast?" one voice asked. "She probably grew up dodging bullets," another replied with a laugh. "No wonder she can run." Reyna turned off the water and wrapped a towel around herself. As she stepped out, the conversation abruptly halted. She didn't say anything, but her gaze met each of theirs in turn, steady and unyielding. One by one, they looked away. Dinner that evening was a mandatory group affair in the academy cafeteria. Recruits clustered at tables, the social hierarchies already forming. Reyna sat alone, methodically working through her meal. She wasn't surprised when Eric approached her table, tray in hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She gestured to the empty seat across from her. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, before Eric spoke again. "You were impressive today," he said. "During the run," Reyna shrugged. "I just kept moving." "It's more than that," Eric insisted. "I don't care what they think. You've got a different kind of focus." For the first time that day, Reyna's expression softened slightly. "Thanks, partner." That night, in the quiet of her bunk, Reyna dreamed of Kyle. It was always the same dream. Her brother answering a routine domestic call, walking up those apartment steps, not knowing that someone was waiting for him with a gun. In the dream, Reyna could see it all happening but could never call out to warn him. She woke with a start, her hand instinctively clutching Kyle's dog tags. The metal was warm from her skin. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten. In a few hours, they would begin day 2. The recruits gathered at dawn in the main yard. Some looked bleary-eyed from lack of sleep. Others were clearly nursing, sore muscles from the previous day's run. Sergeant Brent strode to the front, clipboard in hand. "Tomorrow," she announced, "combat drills begin." A ripple of excitement passed through the group. Cole, who was standing near the front, turned to catch Reyna's eye. His lips curved into a sneer. "Can't wait to see this," he said, loud enough for those around him to hear. Reyna met his gaze evenly, her expression revealing nothing, but inside, a quiet determination burned. She hadn't come this far to be laughed out of the room. Not again. Dawn broke over the academy grounds as recruits filed into the combat training facility. The large room, with its padded floors and mirrored walls, smelled of disinfectant and old sweat. Reyna stood with the others, her hair pulled back tightly, her academy-issued workout clothes hanging slightly loose on her frame. Sergeant Brent strode to the center of the room, her presence immediately commanding attention. Behind her, A stocky man with a shaved head arranged practice mats in a large square. "This," Brent announced, gesturing to the mat area, "is the hand-to-hand combat gauntlet. Today you begin learning how to defend yourselves and subdue resistant subjects without using your firearm." She paced along the edge of the mats, eyes scanning the recruits. "In the field, you won't always have backup. Sometimes all you'll have is your training and your instincts. We're going to test both today." Cole Ramsey rocked back and forth on his heels, barely containing his eagerness. Several other recruits, mostly men, mirrored his enthusiasm. Reyna remained still, her expression neutral, though her eyes followed Brent's every move. "You'll be paired for sparring," Brent continued. "Real techniques, real pressure, no pulling punches. The goal isn't to hurt each other, but to learn your capabilities and limitations." She consulted her clipboard. First match, Ramsey and Daniels. Cole stepped onto the mat with a confident grin, facing off against a recruit named Daniels, a former college wrestler with a solid build. The two circled each other briefly before Cole lunged forward with surprising speed. He caught Daniels with a sweeping leg move that sent him crashing to the mat. Before Daniels could recover, Cole had him pinned, arm twisted behind his back. "Yield," Daniels grunted. Cole held the position a moment longer than necessary before, releasing him, rising to his feet with a flourish. He looked around the room, soaking in the impressed murmurs. Sergeant Brent's mouth tightened. "Effective takedown, Ramsey. But next time, show me more control. This isn't a street fight." Cole nodded, but his smug expression remained unchanged as he rejoined the group. Several more matches followed, some quick and decisive, others drawn-out battles of endurance. Eric faced off against a taller recruit and managed to hold his own, through technical skill rather than brute strength. Then Brent called out, "Thomas and Barden." Reyna stepped onto the mat, facing Tracy Barden, a muscular woman with close-cropped blonde hair who stood at least 4 inches taller than her. Tracy had been among those whispering in the locker room the day before, and there was a glint of anticipation in her eyes now. "Begin," Brent ordered. Tracy charged immediately, clearly hoping to use her superior size to overwhelm Reyna. But at the last moment, Reyna sidestepped with fluid grace. As Tracy's momentum carried her forward, Reyna caught her arm, pivoted, and used Tracy's own weight against her. In one smooth motion, Tracy found herself flipped onto her back, Reyna's knee positioned precisely at her sternum. The entire exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. The room fell silent. Tracy blinked up at Reyna, shock evident on her face. "I yield," she managed. Reyna released her immediately and offered a hand to help her up. Tracy hesitated before accepting it, rising to her feet with a grudging nod of respect. As Reyna walked back to her place, she caught Cole whispering to another recruit. "Fluke," he said dismissively. Then louder, "Hey, who wants to bet? 5 candy bars says she doesn't win her next match." Several recruits glanced between, Cole and Reyna uncertain. No one took the bet. When the day's training ended, Eric caught up with Reyna as she headed toward the water fountain. "That was incredible," he said, eyes wide. "Where'd you learn that?" For a moment, it seemed Reyna might not answer. Then, her voice quiet but clear, she said, "Grew up with 3 brothers, and judo. Lots of judo." Eric grinned. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." Later that afternoon, as Reyna was reviewing the day's tactical theory notes in the common area, Sergeant Brent approached her. The older woman's face was unreadable as she studied Reyna. "Walk with me, Thomas," she said. They stepped outside, away from curious ears. The academy grounds were quiet, most recruits having retreated to the mess hall or their bunks to recover from the day's exertions. "That was impressive work today," Brent said finally. "Your file didn't mention martial arts training." "You didn't ask," Reyna replied simply. Brent's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No, I suppose I didn't." She paused. "Keep that up. You might surprise a few people, including me." The following day brought more combat training. The matches were arranged differently, with recruits facing new opponents. By mid-morning, the inevitable pairing was announced, Thomas and Ramsey. A hush fell over the room. Cole strode onto the mat with exaggerated confidence, rolling his shoulders. "Ladies first," he said with a smirk. Raina took her position opposite him, her face betraying nothing. But there was a focus in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a calm intensity that made several onlookers shift uncomfortably. "Begin," Brent ordered. Cole circled to his right, clearly expecting Raina to be intimidated by his size advantage. When she didn't back away, he lunged, aiming to grapple her to the ground. Raina moved like water, fluid, powerful, inevitable. She ducked under his reach, pivoted behind him, and swept his legs from under him in one continuous motion. As he fell forward, she controlled his descent, twisting his arm into a hold that left him face down on the mat, immobilized. It had taken less than 10 seconds. Gasps echoed through the room. Even Sergeant Brent looked momentarily stunned before composing herself and offering a single, deliberate clap. "Yield," Cole growled, his face flushed with a mixture of pain and humiliation. Raina released him immediately and stepped back, her breathing barely elevated. Cole rose slowly, refusing to meet her eyes or those of his friends. For the rest of the day, the atmosphere in the academy shifted subtly. The chuckles that had followed Raina disappeared. Recruits who had previously ignored her now nodded politely when they passed. During the afternoon tactical session, 2 female recruits even asked to sit beside her. That evening, Raina retreated to her bunk earlier than usual. From her small duffel, she removed a framed photograph, a young man in uniform, his smile wide and genuine, his arm around a younger Raina at her college graduation. "Told you I'd do it, Kyle," she whispered, kissing her thumb and pressing it to his image. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the ache of his absence, the hollow space that his death had left in her life. Then, with careful movements, she returned the photo to its place and zipped the bag closed. Outside in the hallway, voices drifted through the partially open door. "She completely embarrassed him," someone was saying. "Did you see his face?" Cole's never been taken down that fast before, not even by the instructors. Maybe she's not just an affirmative action pick after all. Raina lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Their words meant little to her. She hadn't come here for their approval or their respect, though the latter might make the coming weeks easier. She'd come because of a promise, to herself, to Kyle, to the badge that he had worn with such pride. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, Cole sat on the edge of his bunk, a dark expression clouding his features. Logan Tress, a lean recruit with calculating eyes, leaned against the doorframe. "She embarrassed you," Logan said, his voice low. "That won't go unanswered." Cole looked up, anger flashing across his face. "What are you suggesting?" Logan shrugged. "I'm just saying, people like her need to know their place. She might have some fancy moves, but this is our world. Always has been." "And what exactly do you think we should do about it?" Cole asked, his tone somewhere between curious and challenging. Logan smiled thinly. "Nothing obvious. Nothing that could come back on us. But there are ways to make sure she washes out before graduation." Cole considered this, his wounded pride wrestling with something else, a flicker of doubt perhaps, or conscience. Finally, he shook his head. "Let it go. I'll beat her next time. Fair and square." Logan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, whatever you say." He pushed off from the doorframe and walked away, leaving Cole alone with his thoughts. The next morning, Raina woke before dawn, as had been her habit since childhood. She slipped out of the barracks quietly, not wanting to disturb the other female recruits. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. She began her personal routine, stretching, then a series of flowing movements that combined elements of judo, tai chi, and the boxing her oldest brother had taught her. As her body warmed, her movements became faster, more precise, a dance of discipline and control. She didn't notice Eric watching from the doorway of the men's barracks until she finished. He approached, hands in the pockets of his academy sweats. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, using a small towel to wipe sweat from her forehead. You do that every day? Raina nodded. Since I was 12, Eric smiled. Explains a lot. He hesitated, then added, Look, I should warn you. Some of Cole's friends are pretty upset about yesterday. Logan especially. Logan Tress? Raina asked, recalling the thin-faced recruit who always seemed to be lurking at the edges of conversations. Yeah, he's not a good guy to have as an enemy. Raina considered this. I'm not here to make friends or enemies. I'm here to become a cop. Eric nodded slowly. Just watch your back, okay? As they walked together toward the mess hall for breakfast, Raina thought about Kyle, about the night he died, about the rumors that had swirled afterward. She thought about the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room, both then and now. She was used to watching her back. She'd been doing it her whole life. What she wasn't prepared for was just how far some people would go to ensure she never wore the badge. Raina was halfway through her morning shower when the alarms blared. The piercing sound echoed through the concrete walls of the women's locker room, sending recruits scrambling for towels and clothes. Surprise inspection, someone shouted from the hallway. Everyone in formation in 3 minutes. Water still dripping from her hair, Raina pulled on her academy sweats and joined the rush of recruits filing into the main corridor. Sergeant Brent stood at the center of the chaos, clipboard in hand, her face a mask of stern authority. When I call your name, you will step forward and hand me your locker key, Brent announced. You will then stand at attention while your personal belongings are inspected. Any contraband, any unauthorized items, will result in immediate disciplinary action. One by one, recruits were called forward. Some looked nervous, others bored. When Eric's name was called, he stepped up confidently, handed over his key, and stood tall as the inspection team rifled through his belongings. Clean, the inspector called. Brent nodded, made a mark on her clipboard, and called the next name. Thomas. Raina stepped forward, her face impassive despite the knot forming in her stomach. There was something in Brent's expression. A hardness. That hadn't been there when she'd called the others. The inspection team opened Raina's locker. At first, they found nothing unusual. Neatly folded clothes, basic toiletries, the academy manual with highlighted sections. Then, the lead inspector reached into the back corner of the top shelf and pulled out a small plastic bag containing white pills. The room fell silent. What is this, Thomas? Brent demanded, taking the bag. Raina stared at the bag, genuine shock breaking through her composed exterior. I don't know, ma'am. It's not mine. Brent studied the pills. These appear to be amphetamines, banned substances. Her eyes locked with Raina's. You better have an explanation. I don't take drugs, Raina said firmly. I've never seen those before. Whispers rippled through the assembled recruits. Cole and Logan exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Eric frowned, his eyes darting between Raina and the evidence bag. Everyone except Thomas, dismissed, Brent ordered. Return to your regular schedule. As the recruits filed out, some cast sympathetic glances toward Raina. Others looked smug, as if a suspicion had been confirmed. Eric lingered longest, concern evident in his eyes, until Brent shot him a warning look. When they were alone, Brent placed the bag on a nearby table and crossed her arms. I've seen recruits wash out for less than this. I didn't put those pills there, Raina said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her chest. She'd worked too hard to lose everything now. You're claiming someone planted them? Brent's eyebrow arched skeptically. Yes, ma'am. Brent was silent for a long moment, studying Raina's face. Finally, she sighed. I can't prove it either way. Policy says I should expel you immediately. Raina felt her heart sink. But, Brent continued, I've been watching you, Thomas. You've shown exceptional skill and discipline. It would be unfortunate to lose a potentially valuable officer without due process. Hope flickered in Raina's chest. So here's what's going to happen, Brent said. You'll get a chance to prove yourself in the next drills. The pills will be sent for testing and fingerprinting. If they come back with your prints, or if you fail even once in the upcoming trials, you're out. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. As Raina turned to leave, Brent added, "And Thomas. If someone is targeting you, watch your back. Not everyone wants to see people like you succeed in this academy." "People like me, ma'am?" Brent's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "People with integrity." That afternoon, Raina found Eric in the library, poring over tactical manuals. He looked up as she approached, relief washing over his features. "You're still here," he said. "What happened?" Raina slid into the chair across from him. "Brent's giving me a chance to prove myself, but I need to find out who planted those pills." Eric glanced around to ensure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "I checked the security cameras during lunch break. There's a blind spot in the hallway near the women's locker room, and the footage between 3 and 4 a.m. is mysteriously missing." "Someone who knows the security system," Raina mused. "Any ideas?" Eric hesitated. "Logan works part-time in campus security. He'd know how to access the system. But why would he target me? I barely know him." "He's tight with Cole," Eric reminded her. "And Cole's pride took a serious hit when you put him down in front of everyone." Raina considered this. "I need evidence." "Be careful," Eric warned. "If they're willing to plant drugs, who knows what else they might do." That night, as Raina lay in her bunk, memories of another accusation surfaced. Her last job at Memorial Hospital. Medical supplies had gone missing, and somehow her name had appeared on the log for accessing the storage room during those times. She'd been fired despite her protests of innocence, unable to prove she'd been set up. She'd walked away then, swallowed the injustice rather than fight. This time would be different. Morning brought the obstacle course challenge, a brutal test of physical endurance that wound through the academy grounds. Mud pits, climbing walls, barbed wire crawls, and balance beams stood between the recruits and the finish line. "This course separates the dedicated from the dilettantes," Brent announced. "You'll be timed individually, but remember, in the field, you're part of a team. The fastest individual time earns privileges, but the squad with the best average gets a weekend pass." Raina stretched methodically, aware of the eyes on her. Some recruits were openly betting on her failure, others keeping a cautious distance as if her troubles might be contagious. Only Eric stood beside her, loyal despite the whispers. Cole went first, attacking the course with raw power. He cleared obstacles with brute strength, finishing with a respectable time that earned cheers from his friends. When Logan ran, he moved, with calculated efficiency, conserving energy for the harder challenges. When Raina's turn came, the audience had grown. Even administrative staff had wandered out to watch. She took her position at the starting line, clearing her mind of everything except the course before her. The whistle blew. Raina moved with controlled precision, applying the perfect amount of force to each obstacle. Where others had charged through the mud pit, she found the shallow path along the edge. When others had muscled up the climbing wall, she used technique to ascend with minimal exertion. By the halfway point, she was ahead of the record pace. She could hear murmurs from the sidelines, feel the weight of Brent's evaluating gaze. This was more than a physical test now. It was her chance to prove she belonged. As she approached the final stretch, a 30-foot rope climb, she heard Cole's voice from the crowd. "Let's see if those judo moves help you now." Raina blocked him out, focusing only on the rope. Hand over hand, she ascended, legs wrapped properly to distribute her weight. She reached the bell at the top and rang it firmly before descending in a controlled slide. She crossed the finish line and stopped. Her own timer. The digital display showed the second fastest time of the day, beaten only by Davis, a former Olympic hopeful in track and field. Sergeant Brent made a note on her clipboard, her expression revealing nothing. But as Raina walked past, she caught the older woman's slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done. The victory was short-lived, however. During lunch, Raina overheard Logan speaking to a group of recruits in the mess hall. "It's not the first time she's been caught with something she shouldn't have," he said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "I have a buddy who works at Memorial Hospital. Said she was fired for stealing medical supplies, probably selling them on the side, or using them herself." The accusation hung in the air. Raina felt eyes on her back, the weight of judgment pressing down. She put down her fork, no longer hungry. Later that day, Eric confronted Logan in the men's locker room. The confrontation was brief but intense. "You planted those pills," Eric said, backing Logan against the lockers. "I know it was you." Logan's thin lips curved into a smirk. "Prove it." "I'm going to Brent with what I know." "What exactly do you know?" Logan challenged. "You've got nothing but suspicions. And who's going to believe you? You're just as much of an outsider as she is." Eric's hands balled into fists. "You're pathetic, you know that? What are you gonna do? She'll be gone in 2 days anyway." Logan's smirk widened. "Exactly. So why get your hands dirty?" The next morning brought another challenge, a live fire exercise with tactical vests that simulated being hit by gunfire. Recruits were divided into teams, given training weapons that fired special marking rounds, and tasked with clearing a mock building. Raina checked her equipment carefully, especially the tactical vest that would register hits during the exercise. Something seemed off about the fit, but before she could investigate further, the call came to take positions. She and Eric were paired with 2 other recruits, Julia Winters and Mark Davis. Their objective was to clear the east wing of the training facility, secure any hostages, and neutralize threats. "Move on my signal," Raina whispered as they approached the first doorway. Her team nodded, falling naturally into her leadership. They entered the first room smoothly, covering all angles. A hostile target popped up, and Raina neutralized it, with a clean shot to the center mass. They proceeded methodically through the next 2 rooms, working with coordinated precision. As they approached the final room, Raina took point position. The moment she stepped through the doorway, a training round struck her chest, except her vest didn't register the hit. Instead, a sharp pain lanced through her ribs as the round struck with unexpected force. She stumbled backward, momentarily, disoriented. "Raina!" Eric called out, moving to cover her. She recovered quickly, completing the exercise despite the throbbing pain in her side. Later, when they turned in their equipment, she examined her vest and found that the protective padding had been partially removed, leaving her vulnerable to the impact of the training rounds. "Someone tampered with this," she told Eric, showing him the altered vest. Eric's expression darkened. "This has gone beyond pranks. This could have seriously hurt you." That evening, Raina made a decision. She knocked on Sergeant Brent's office door, her resolve firm despite the risk. "Enter," Brent called. Raina stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately." Brent gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What's on your mind, Thomas?" For the next 20 minutes, Raina laid out everything. The planted drugs, the missing security footage, the tampered vest, and even the false accusation from her previous job. She spoke without emotion, presenting only facts rather than accusations. When she finished, Brent was silent for a long moment. "Why should I believe you?" she finally asked. "These are serious allegations against fellow recruits." Raina met her, gaze steadily. 6 years ago, my brother was killed in the line of duty. Everyone said it was a random shooting during a domestic call gone wrong, but Kyle had told me things weren't right in his precinct. He was going to report some officers. Before he died, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the dog tags she always wore. I promised him I'd become the kind of officer he wanted to be. Honest, fair, willing to stand up for what's right. I wouldn't throw that away for performance enhancers or petty rivalries. Brent studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I appreciate your candor, Thomas. I can't take action without proof, but..." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "You better finish strong. Then I'll believe you." The next morning, the entire class gathered in the main hall. Brent stood at the front, her posture rigid, her expression severe. "Your final evaluation begins tomorrow," she announced. "A tactical simulation involving a real-time hostage rescue scenario. You will be divided into squads of your choosing and evaluated not just on your individual performance, but on your ability to function as a cohesive unit." Murmurs of excitement rippled through the group. "Choose your teams wisely," Brent continued. You have until 0600 tomorrow to submit your rosters. As the recruits dispersed, Cole approached Reyna, his expression smug. No hard feelings about the combat training, he said loudly enough for others to hear. But I think I'll pass on having you on my team. Can't risk working with someone under investigation. Reyna met his gaze evenly, saying nothing, but as she turned away, she realized that his words had created a ripple effect. Other recruits were now avoiding eye contact with her, clearly unwilling to risk their evaluation by choosing her. Only Eric remained steadfastly by her side. But two people wouldn't be enough for the tactical exercise. As the day wore on, the situation became increasingly clear. She was being isolated, cut off from the opportunity to prove herself in the final test. It was sabotage of a different, more subtle kind, but just as effective. Morning dawned clear and cold, a thin layer of frost coating the academy grounds. Recruits huddled in small groups outside the tactical training building, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. The final evaluation would make or break many careers. Sergeant Brent emerged from the building, clipboard in hand. Time to form your teams, she announced. When I call your name, step forward with your squad. One by one, recruits organized themselves into teams. Cole moved first, gathering a team of 6, including Logan and several other strong performers. His confident smirk spoke volumes as he glanced toward Reyna, who stood alone except for Eric. Thomas, Brent called. Your squad? Reyna stepped forward, Eric immediately moving to her side. They stood together, clearly 2 members short of a viable team. Cole's smirk widened. Let's see what Miss Martial Arts does with half a squad, he whispered loudly to Logan. Then, unexpectedly, 2 more recruits stepped forward to join Reyna and Eric. Julia Winters, a quiet, methodical woman who had kept to herself throughout training, and Malik Turner, a former security officer whose steady reliability had earned him respect among the instructors. We're with Thomas, Julia announced simply. Surprise flickered across Cole's face before he masked it with a dismissive shrug, but Reyna caught the uncertain glance he exchanged with Logan. This wasn't part of their plan. With all teams formed, Brent led them into the tactical facility. Inside, a complex maze of rooms had been constructed to simulate an office building. Observers, including several SWAT team members, watched from an elevated platform. Your scenario, Brent explained, involves a hostage situation in this office. Complex. Multiple armed threats have taken civilians hostage on different floors. Your objective is to secure all hostages and neutralize all threats with minimal casualties. She pointed to a table laden with equipment. Tactical vests, training, weapons that fired marking rounds, communication devices, and building schematics. You'll be evaluated on decision-making, coordination, threat assessment, and execution. Real SWAT operators will be observing and scoring your performance. This is as close to a real operation as we can make it. Cole's team immediately began, grabbing the best equipment, talking loudly about their strategy. Reyna approached the table more deliberately, studying the building schematic first. Eric, check the comms, she said quietly. Julia, grab 4 vests. Make sure they're properly padded this time. Malik, I need you on the weapons. Choose for reliability, not firepower. Her team moved with efficient purpose, each focusing on their assigned task. While Cole's squad argued over positions and approach angles, Reyna gathered her team in a corner, speaking in low tones. The schematic shows 3 primary entry points, she explained, pointing to the diagram she'd sketched. Most teams will go through the main entrance, expecting to find hostages on the upper floors. But look here. She indicated a service corridor. This gives access to all floors with minimal exposure. It's where I'd secure hostages if I were planning this scenario. You think they're being held in the maintenance areas? Malik asked. Reyna nodded. Or nearby. We enter through the southeast service door, move quietly, and clear each floor from the inside out. What about hand signals? Eric suggested. Minimize noise. Good, Reyna agreed. Julia, you and Malik take point. Eric and I will cover the rear. Questions? There were none. Her team's confidence in her leadership was absolute. The simulation, began with a briefing. Terrorists had taken over the building, holding multiple hostages. Intelligence suggested they were distributed throughout the facility. Teams would enter from different points simultaneously. As predicted, Cole's squad chose the main entrance, charging in with aggressive confidence. 3 other teams took the remaining obvious entry points. Only Reina's team slipped quietly through the service entrance, unnoticed in the initial chaos. Inside the dimly lit corridor, Reina signaled for silence. They moved like shadows, checking corners before advancing, communicating through practiced hand gestures. When they encountered their first threat, a role player with a training weapon, Julia and Malik neutralized him before he could radio their position. Floor by floor, they cleared sections of the building, discovering hostages in unexpected locations, a supply closet, a break room, the security office. Each was secured and evacuated with quiet efficiency. Meanwhile, throughout the building, the sounds of other teams engaging in firefights echoed. Shouts, simulated gunfire, the occasional call of "man down" as recruits took hits that their vests registered as fatal. On the 3rd floor, Reina's team encountered a complex situation. 3 armed threats guarding 4 hostages in an open office area. No way to approach without being seen. "Distraction," Reina whispered, outlining a quick plan. Moments later, Eric triggered a fire alarm in an adjacent room. As the threats turned toward the noise, Reina's team struck from 3 angles simultaneously. All 3 terrorists were neutralized without a single shot fired toward the hostages. As they guided the rescued hostages toward the evacuation point, a SWAT observer nodded approvingly from his observation post. In stark contrast, Cole's team had encountered problems almost immediately. Their aggressive entry had alerted multiple threats at once, resulting in a chaotic firefight. Logan had been killed in the first exchange, and 2 more team members went down while trying to breach a barricaded room. Cole, now frustrated and shouting contradictory orders, led his remaining teammates into a fatal error. They breached a room without proper reconnaissance and accidentally killed 2 hostages in the crossfire. The simulation ended after 90 minutes. Teams gathered in the debriefing room, some looking dejected, others jubilant. Cole's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment as the SWAT team leader stepped forward. "Let's review your performance," the SWAT commander began. He was a weathered man in his 40s, with the calm demeanor of someone who had seen real combat. Team performance varied significantly, but one squad stood out from the rest. He consulted his tablet. Team Thomas completed the simulation with 0 casualties. Both team members and hostages, they secured all assigned hostages, neutralized all threats, and had the fastest completion time of any squad. Their execution was nearly flawless. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several recruits glanced at Reina with newfound respect. Their approach demonstrated excellent tactical awareness, the commander continued. Using unconventional entry points, maintaining stealth, prioritizing hostage safety over threat neutralization. These are the hallmarks of professional tactical operations. Cole glared across the room, his humiliation complete. Logan, still, marked with the blue dye that indicated a fatal hit, whispered something in his ear, but Cole shrugged him off. Team Ramsey, the commander addressed Cole's group, showed courage and initiative, but tactical discipline was lacking. 2 hostage casualties is unacceptable in any scenario. In real life, that would be a failed operation, regardless of other objectives achieved. The evaluation continued, with each team receiving detailed feedback. Throughout, Reina's team remained composed, neither celebrating nor drawing attention to their success. When the debriefing concluded, one of the SWAT evaluators approached Reina. "You ever trained before?" he asked. She nodded slightly. "I attended night classes at the Westside Tactical School for 2 years while working night shifts at the hospital." The evaluator looked impressed. "It shows. You have good instincts, not just for the technical aspects, but for leading a team. That's something we can't teach." As the recruits filed out of the facility, Sergeant Brent stood by the door, observing. When Reina passed, Brent motioned for her to wait. Once the others had left, Brent addressed the remaining instructors and evaluators. "I think the rankings are clear after today's performance." She walked to the front of the room, where a whiteboard displayed the recruits' names in order of their overall standing. Taking a marker, she wrote Thomas at the top of the list. "There's one name on the top of the board," she announced, "and she's earned it the hard way." The assembled staff nodded in agreement. Even those who had been skeptical of Reyna initially couldn't deny the evidence of her performance. Outside, the news spread quickly. By the time Reyna reached the main building, recruits were already discussing the results. Some offered congratulations, others just respectful nods. A few, including Cole's inner circle, remained resentful, but their numbers had dwindled. Eric caught up with her in the corridor. "That was incredible," he said. "The way you read that building layout. How did you know?" Reyna allowed herself a small smile. "I've been studying tactical scenarios every night since I got here. Plus, I've worked in enough buildings to know where people hide the important things." As they turned the corner, they nearly collided with Cole, who was storming out of a meeting room. His face darkened when he saw Reyna. "This isn't over," he muttered as he brushed past. Eric looked concerned, but Reyna remained unfazed. "It is, for him," she said quietly. "He just doesn't know it yet." The graduation ceremony was scheduled for the following afternoon. Recruits spent the morning cleaning their quarters, returning equipment, and preparing for their final assessments. An atmosphere of nervous excitement permeated the academy. Reyna was packing her few personal items when Julia knocked on her door. "Duck, Squad wanted to thank you," she said, handing Reyna a small box. Inside was a tactical watch. Simple, durable, exactly what a field officer would need. "You didn't have to do this," Reyna said, genuinely touched. Julia shrugged. "You took a chance on us when no one would take a chance on you. We won't forget that." Before Reyna could respond, the Academy's PA system crackled to life. "Thomas, report to Sergeant Brent's office immediately." Julia raised an eyebrow. "Last-minute pep talk?" "We'll see," Reyna replied, though something in her gut told her this wasn't a routine summons. Brent's office door was open when Reyna arrived. The sergeant wasn't alone. A man in a crisp suit stood by the window, his back to the door. He turned as Reyna entered, revealing a weathered face with intelligent eyes. Black in his early 50s, with the watchful demeanor of someone accustomed to observing rather than being observed. "Thomas, this is Agent Calvin Rhodes," Brent said, her tone formal. "He's from Internal Affairs." Reyna felt a momentary flash of concern. Internal Affairs typically investigated police misconduct. What could they want with a recruit who hadn't even graduated? "Please sit down," Rhodes said, his voice deep and measured. Reyna took the offered chair, maintaining her composure, despite her confusion. "Sergeant Brent has been keeping me informed of your progress," Rhodes began. "Your performance has been exceptional, particularly in light of the obstacles you've faced." Reyna glanced at Brent, who nodded slightly. "You've caught our attention," Rhodes continued. "We're building a task force, and we think you belong on it." The statement hung in the air, unexpected and momentous. Reyna struggled to process it. "I don't understand," she finally said. "I haven't even graduated. I have no field experience." Brent leaned forward in her chair. "Sometimes the right person isn't the most experienced. It's the one who sees the job clearly." Rhodes nodded in agreement. "What we need isn't just technical skill or tactical knowledge, though you've demonstrated both. What we need is integrity, the courage to stand alone when necessary." He placed a folder on Brent's desk. "We'd like you to consider joining our team. This would mean a different path than the one you expected. Specialized training, undercover work, investigations that most officers never see." Reyna looked down at the folder, then back at Rhodes. "Why me?" "Because you've already proven you can withstand pressure," he replied simply. "And because we have reason to believe your brother's death wasn't as random as it appeared." The words hit Reyna like a physical blow. She gripped the arms of her chair, steadying herself. "We're giving you 24 hours to decide," Rhodes said, his tone gentler now. "This isn't a choice to make lightly." As she left Brent's office, the folder tucked under her arm, Raina felt as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Everything she'd worked for, everything she thought she knew about her future, had just been rewritten. The familiar weight of Kyle's dog tags hung against her chest, a constant reminder of why she'd come here in the first place. His voice seemed to whisper from memory. If anything ever happens to me, it wasn't just a bad call. Dig deeper, and trust no one. Now it seemed she would have the chance to do exactly that. Raina stood by the window of her dormitory, the internal affairs folder open on the desk beside her. The contents were sparse but significant. Photos of evidence lockers with inventory sheets that didn't match, transcripts of coded radio conversations, surveillance images of officers meeting with known drug dealers, and most disturbing of all, a timeline of her brother Kyle's final days, marked with meetings and calls he'd made to an unlisted number. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Eric stood in the hallway, concern etched on his face. "Everyone's talking about you getting called to Brent's office," he said. "What happened?" Raina hesitated, then pulled him inside and closed the door. "What I'm about to tell you stays between us." For the next 10 minutes, she outlined Rhodes's offer, carefully, omitting classified details. Eric listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. "Internal affairs?" he finally said, voice hushed despite the closed door. "That's... wow. I know. Are you going to take it?" Raina turned back to the window. "I don't know yet." Eric leaned against the desk, brow furrowed. "IA doesn't recruit for nothing. They only call in when something stinks." He met her gaze directly. "If you accept, you'll be working against the very people you just joined. That's dangerous." "I'm aware. And not just physically dangerous," Eric pressed. "Cops who work with IA are seen as traitors. Even the good ones will freeze you out." Raina was silent for a moment, her fingers finding Kyle's dog tags through her shirt. She could almost hear his voice. That last voicemail he'd left her the night before he died. She'd played it so many times she had it memorized. "Hey, Rye. Just checking in. Things are complicated at work right now. I'm handling it, but listen, if anything ever happens to me, it wasn't just a bad call. Dig deeper. And trust no one. Love you, sis." The next morning he was dead, shot responding to what was logged as a domestic disturbance call. "I need to do this," she said finally. "For Kyle." Eric nodded slowly. "Then I've got your back, whatever you need." "Thank you," Raina said, genuinely moved. "But the less you know from here on out, the safer you'll be." The following morning, Raina reported to Brent's office. Rhodes was waiting, along with another IA officer, a stern-faced woman who was introduced only as Hall. "You've made your decision?" Rhodes asked without preamble. "I'm in," Raina replied, "but I have conditions." Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear them." "Full access to all files related to my brother's case, and when this is over, whoever was responsible faces justice. No deals, no quiet retirements." Rhodes and Hall exchanged glances before Rhodes nodded. "Agreed. Now here's your situation." For the next hour, they briefed her on the investigation. A ring of corrupt officers was helping cover illegal raids and skimming from asset seizures. Drugs, cash, and weapons were disappearing from evidence, only to reappear on the streets. The trail led directly back to the academy, specifically to certain instructors with connections to Raina's brother's precinct. "We believe your brother stumbled onto this operation," Hall explained, and was silenced before he could report. "Who's involved?" Raina asked, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "That's what you're going to help us find out," Rhodes said. "We have suspicions but no concrete evidence linking the players. We need someone on the inside who won't raise flags." The plan was laid out methodically. Raina would graduate as scheduled, but would be placed on a community outreach patrol in the city's eastern district, an area known for high crime and minimal supervision. Her partner would be none other than Logan Tress. Tress? Raina couldn't hide her surprise. "He was part of the group targeting me during training." "Exactly," Rhodes confirmed. "He's a recent graduate but already showing signs of involvement. He's been seen with officers we suspect are part of the ring. Your history with him provides the perfect cover. No one will question why you two don't get along. Reyna absorbed this information, already calculating angles and approaches. And my mission? Observe. Record. Gather evidence, Hall said, sliding a small device across the table. It looked like an ordinary cell phone. This has been modified for our purposes. Audio recording, secure communication, GPS tracking that only we can access. What about Eric Liu? Reyna asked. He was my partner during training. He'll ask questions if I'm suddenly paired with Logan. Liu is clean, Rhodes assured her. We've vetted him thoroughly. He'll be assigned to cyber crimes, far from your operation but still within the department. It's better if you maintain minimal contact with him for now. The graduation ceremony that afternoon was a blur of blue uniforms, polished badges and proud families. Reyna stood tall as Brent pinned the badge to her chest, the sergeant's eyes communicating a silent message of respect and caution. No one from Reyna's family was present. Her mother had passed 3 years earlier, and with Kyle gone, there was no one left to cheer her name. But as she scanned the audience, she spotted Rhodes standing at the back, his presence a reminder of the real battle ahead. After the ceremony, as new officers mingled with family and friends, Cole approached her unexpectedly. His expression was unreadable. "Congratulations, Thomas," he said stiffly, extending his hand. Reyna shook it cautiously. "You too, Ramsey." "We're headed to different precincts," he continued. "You got East Side, I heard." "That's right. Tough neighborhood." There was something in his tone. Not quite a threat, but a suggestion. "Watch yourself out there. Not everyone will have your back." Before she could respond, he walked away, joining a group of graduates that included Logan, who shot her a cold glance. 3 days later, Reyna reported for her first shift at the East Side precinct. The station was older than the academy, with cracked linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man named Wilkins, barely looked up as he handed her assignment sheet. "You're with Tress today," he said, jerking his thumb toward the break room. "Car 17. Logan was waiting by the coffee machine, already in uniform. His expression soured when he saw her. "Of all the rookies they could pair me with," he muttered. "Trust? Me, I'm not thrilled either," Reyna replied, playing her part. Their patrol area covered 6 blocks of mostly residential streets, dotted with convenience stores and small businesses struggling to survive. It was a neighborhood in decline, evident in the boarded-up windows, graffiti-covered walls, and wary eyes that tracked the patrol car's movement. Logan drove in silence for the first hour, responding to calls with minimal efficiency. A shoplifting complaint, a noise disturbance, a fender bender in a grocery store parking lot. Routine calls handled with a dismissive attitude that set Reyna's teeth on edge. "You always this chatty on patrol?" she finally asked. Logan glanced at her. "Just keeping it professional. Wouldn't want to say anything that might end up in some report." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You tell me, IA's new pet." Reyna's heart skipped, but her face revealed nothing. "What are you talking about?" Logan snorted. "Please, why else would they stick you in East Side? This isn't exactly a prime assignment for Academy's top graduate, unless you're here to watch the rest of us." "I'm here because I requested community." "Patrol," Reyna lied smoothly. "I want to work where I can make a difference, not write parking tickets downtown." "Right," Logan drawled. "St. Thomas, here to save the neighborhood." Before she could respond, the radio crackled. "Car 17, we've got a disturbance at 1845 Maple, apartment 3C. Neighbor reports possible domestic." Logan grabbed the radio. "Car 17 responding." As they drove toward the address, Reyna felt a chill. That had nothing to do with the air conditioning, a domestic call, just like the one that had taken Kyle's life. The apartment building was a dreary 5-story walk-up with peeling paint and a security door that had long since stopped locking. They climbed to the 3rd floor, hearing the shouting before they reached apartment 3C. Logan pounded on the door. "Police, open up!" The shouting stopped abruptly. After a moment, The door opened to reveal a middle-aged black woman with a split lip and the beginning of a bruise around her left eye. "Everything's fine, officers," she said quietly. "Just a little disagreement." Behind her, a man sat on the couch, his posture tense, eyes bloodshot. "We don't need any cops here," he called. "She fell, that's all." Raina stepped forward. "Ma'am, we'd like to talk to you separately if that's all right." The woman hesitated, glancing back at the man. "It's fine, Denise," he said, his casual tone, belied by the warning in his eyes. "Tell them what happened." Logan sighed impatiently. "Look, we can stand here all day or you can tell us what's going on so we can get back to real police work." Raina shot him a sharp look before turning back to the woman. "Ma'am, would you step into the hallway with me for a moment?" Once outside, the woman, Denise, seemed to deflate, leaning against the wall. "It's not what you think," she began. "I think someone hit you," Raina said gently, "and I think you're scared." Denise's eyes welled with tears. "He'll kill me if I say anything. He knows people." "What people?" "Cops," Denise whispered. "He's got friends on the force. Last time I called, they took him outside, laughed with him, and left. Then it got worse." Raina felt sick. "I can help you. There are shelters, resources." "No," Denise cut her off, wiping her eyes. "No reports, no shelters. I tried that road before." Inside the apartment, Logan was chatting with the boyfriend, their tones surprisingly cordial. When Raina re-entered with Denise, Logan stood. "All set? Seems like a misunderstanding." "We should file a report," Raina insisted. Logan rolled his eyes. "For what? She said she fell." "That's not what she told me." "It's fine," Denise interjected quickly. "Really, officers, I did fall. Clumsy of me." The boyfriend, Todd, Raina had learned from Denise, smiled. "See? Just like I said. Thanks for checking, though." He turned to Logan. "Say hi to Jenkins for me. Tell him we're still on for poker Friday." Logan nodded. "Will do." Back in the patrol car, Raina couldn't contain her frustration. "We're just leaving? That woman is clearly being abused." "She doesn't want help," Logan said dismissively, "and we've got real crimes to deal with. Domestic violence is a real crime. Look, rookie, you'll learn quick that you can't save everyone. Some people don't want saving." He glanced at her. "And some cops don't need your judgment. Jenkins is a good officer." Raina made a mental note of the name. Jenkins, connected to both Logan and the abuser. Another thread to pull. The rest of the shift passed with similar incidents. Logan dismissing civilian concerns, making crude comments about affirmative action when Raina tried to be thorough, laughing off violations that should have resulted in citations or arrests. That evening, alone in her new apartment, Raina documented everything in her encrypted IA file. Logan's behavior, the Jenkins connection, the way certain calls were handled differently than others. A text from Rhodes arrived just after midnight. "Progress?" Raina replied simply, "Following threads." The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern. Days spent with Logan, observing his selective enforcement and the network of friends he seemed to have throughout the precinct. Nights spent documenting, researching, connecting dots. During a particularly quiet midnight shift, Logan brought the patrol car to a stop behind an abandoned warehouse. "Bathroom break," he announced, exiting the vehicle. Instead of heading for the building, however, he walked to the back of the lot where another patrol car was parked, its lights off. Raina watched through the side mirror as Logan spoke with the officers, something exchanging hands. When he returned 15 minutes later, his mood was noticeably improved. "Let's swing by Mason Street," he said. "Got a tip about some activity there." "What kind of activity?" "The kind we get paid to stop," he replied vaguely. They turned down Mason, a street lined with vacant storefronts. Logan pulled to a stop in front of a boarded-up convenience store and killed the lights. "Stay here," he ordered. "Keep the engine running." "Protocol says we stay together," Raina objected. "Protocol is for rookies who don't know any better." His tone hardened. "Stay in the car." As soon as Logan disappeared around the back of the building, Raina slipped out of the patrol car. Moving silently along the shadows, she positioned herself where she could observe without being seen. Logan met two men behind the store. One handed him a small envelope. The other opened the trunk of a car, revealing what appeared to be several weapons. Raina's phone, the modified one from Rhodes, captured everything. Back at the station, as their shift ended, Logan seemed almost friendly. "Not bad today, Thomas. Maybe you're learning after all." "Just doing my job," she replied neutrally. "Yeah, well." He hesitated. "Look, this job isn't always by the book. Sometimes you gotta bend the rules to get things done. The sooner you understand that, the better." It was the closest thing to an olive branch he'd offered. Raina recognized it for what it was. A test, a tentative invitation into his world of compromised ethics. "I'll keep that in mind," she said carefully. The next day, while Logan was in a meeting, Raina used her access card to enter the evidence room under the pretense of filing paperwork from a recent arrest. The room was empty, except for a drowsy clerk who barely acknowledged her presence. Moving through the rows of shelved evidence, she noted several discrepancies between the logs and the actual items stored. A box that should have contained 3 kilos of cocaine held barely 1. A weapon seizure from a gang raid was missing 2 handguns. Most concerning was what she found in the basement, a hidden storage area behind a maintenance door containing unlogged weapons and cash, all confiscated, none officially documented. That night she met Rhodes in a 24-hour diner 20 miles outside their jurisdiction. "It's bigger than we thought," Rhodes said after reviewing her findings. "The evidence you've collected suggests this operation has tendrils throughout the department." "And my brother?" Raina asked. Rhodes slid a file across the table. "Based on the connections you've uncovered, we've been able to reconstruct his last few weeks." Kyle was investigating Jenkins, the same officer Logan mentioned. Jenkins is connected to at least 3 other officers, all of whom have unusual financial activity. So Kyle was killed because he was getting too close. "That's our working theory," Rhodes confirmed. "But we need more. Solid evidence that will stand up in court." 2 days later, Raina received a text from Eric asking to meet. They hadn't spoken much since graduation, both busy with their new assignments. She agreed to coffee at a shop halfway between their precincts. Eric looked tired. His usual energy dimmed. He glanced around nervously before speaking. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice low. "My supervisor's been asking me to alter some reports. Evidence logs from drug busts, mostly. Changing timestamps, inventory numbers." Raina kept her expression neutral despite her racing heart. "What did you do?" "I did it once," Eric admitted, shame evident in his voice. "I didn't know what it was for, but now more officers are involved. The pressure's getting worse. I'm scared, Raina." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Document everything. Names, dates, exactly what they asked you to change. But don't confront anyone." "What's going on?" he asked. "This isn't normal rookie hazing, is it?" "No," Raina confirmed. "It's not, but I can't tell you more right now, just be careful." As she left the coffee shop, Raina's phone buzzed with a message from Rhodes. "Time for Phase 2. Be ready." The plan came together with military precision. Rhodes and his IA team had been building their case methodically, using Raina's intelligence to connect the dots. Now they were ready to move from investigation to entrapment. "We're setting up a fake shipment," Rhodes explained during their secure briefing. "Allegedly drug money being transferred from evidence to the federal holding facility. The trap is to see which officers show up to intercept and reroute it." Raina studied the operation details. "And my role? You'll be part of the transport." "Detail," Hall said. "A rookie assignment, nothing that would raise suspicions. We need eyes inside the operation when it happens." The date was set for the following Tuesday, a notoriously slow night for police activity, when staffing would be minimal and supervision lax. Raina would be wearing a wire, with IA agents positioned strategically along the route. What no one expected was Logan's sudden interest in the assignment. "I heard you got transport duty next week," he said during their patrol shift. "Sounds boring as hell." Raina shrugged. Better than writing parking tickets. Mind if I tag along? I could use the overtime, and it beats sitting around the precinct. Warning. Bells rang in Raina's mind. Logan never volunteered for additional work, especially not mundane assignments. His request could only mean one thing. He knew something about the shipment. She played it cool. Sure, if the sergeant approves it. That evening, she updated Rhodes on this development. His response was immediate. This confirms Tress is involved. The leak must be coming from inside the department. Proceed as planned, but be extra cautious. On the night of the operation, Raina arrived early at the precinct, mentally preparing herself. The fake shipment, $500,000 in marked bills, was secured in a standard transport container, indistinguishable from those used for actual evidence transfers. Logan appeared unusually focused, checking and rechecking the transport vehicle. "Ready for a boring night?" he asked, his casual tone at odds with the tension in his shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be," Raina replied. The transport route took them through the city's warehouse district, a maze of abandoned buildings and poorly lit streets. Perfect for an ambush, which was precisely why Rhodes had selected it. IA agents were positioned throughout the area, disguised as homeless individuals or sitting in unmarked vehicles. Halfway through the route, their radio crackled with static. "Dispatch to Transport 7. Be advised, we're experiencing system issues. Backup. Units will be delayed. Proceed with caution." Logan exchanged a glance with Raina. "Convenient timing. Should we wait for the system to come back online?" she asked, testing him. "Negative. We stick to the schedule." There was an edge to his voice now, anticipation barely concealed. As they turned down a particularly desolate street, lined with empty loading docks, Logan suddenly hit the brakes. "Did you see that? Movement by the east entrance." Before Raina could respond, headlights flooded their vehicle from behind. 2 SUVs had boxed them in, cutting off any escape route. "Stay in the car," Logan ordered, reaching for his weapon. But instead of taking a defensive position, he stepped out with his hands raised as if he'd been expecting this interruption. Raina activated her wire with a subtle movement, then followed him out, hand on her holster. 4 masked figures emerged from the SUVs, weapons drawn. "Police! On the ground!" one shouted, though the command made no sense. They were already police. Officers. "It's just us," Logan called. "Where's Jackson?" One of the masked men stepped forward. "Change of plans. Jackson couldn't make it." Something in the voice made Raina freeze. Despite the mask, she recognized the speaker immediately. Cole. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Cole wasn't just part of this, he was leading it, and he thought the money was real. "You're not just a recruit," Cole said bitterly, turning toward Raina. "You were sent here to bring us down." She pulled her weapon, years of training kicking in automatically. "Police officer, drop your weapons." Cole laughed, the sound hollow behind his mask. "Really? You're outnumbered, rookie." "Am I?" Raina asked, her voice steady. Cole's eyes narrowed. Then, with a sudden movement, he fired at the streetlight above them, plunging the area into darkness. Gunfire erupted as Raina dove behind the transport vehicle for cover. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of movement. Cole's team spreading out, trying to flank her position. She returned fire strategically, aiming to disable rather than kill. A figure appeared at her side, Logan. For a heartbeat, she expected him to shoot her. Instead, he grabbed one of the masked officers who had circled behind them, wrestling him to the ground. "Federal agent," Logan shouted, pressing his knee into the man's back. "You're under arrest." The revelation hit Raina like a physical blow. Logan wasn't corrupt. He was undercover, just like her. In the distance, sirens wailed as Rhodes and his team moved in. Cole, realizing the trap, attempted to flee, but found his escape route blocked by IA agents emerging from their hidden positions. "Drop it, Ramsey," Rhodes commanded, his weapon trained on Cole. For a tense moment, it seemed Cole might choose to go down fighting. Then slowly, he lowered his weapon. "You crossed the line when you stole from Kyle Thomas," Logan said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. He turned to Reyna. "I've been working this case for 8 months. Your brother was my training officer. Before he died, as the scene was secured, officers in handcuffs, evidence being collected, Rhodes pulled Reyna aside. "There's something you need to know," he said, his expression grave. "Your brother wasn't killed randomly. We've confirmed he was murdered by fellow officers after threatening to go to internal affairs with what he'd discovered." Despite having suspected it, hearing the truth spoken aloud hit Reyna with devastating force. She walked away from the scene, needing a moment alone. In the parking lot of the warehouse, she finally allowed the grief she'd been holding back to surface, tears flowing freely as she leaned against a concrete wall. Footsteps approached. Sergeant Brent, who had arrived with the backup units. "I couldn't tell you," Brent said softly. "We needed your genuine reactions throughout training to maintain your cover." "You knew? All along?" Brent nodded. "Rhodes recruited me 3 years ago, after I reported misconduct in my previous precinct. When your application came across my desk, with your brother's name in your history, we saw an opportunity." She placed a hand on Reyna's shoulder. "You gave him the justice no one else could." As dawn broke over the city, Cole was escorted to a waiting cruiser, his hands cuffed behind his back. He paused as he passed Reyna, his face bruised from the struggle, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and something else, perhaps respect. "You're just like your brother," he said, his voice low. "Too noble for this job." Reyna watched as the cruiser pulled away, carrying the man who had once mocked her, then tried to destroy her, and ultimately had underestimated her at every turn. The fight wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, more corruption to uncover. But in this moment, standing in the growing light of a new day, Reyna felt the weight of her promise to Kyle shift from a burden to a purpose fulfilled. She touched the dog tags at her neck and whispered, "It's done." The headlines dominated every news outlet in the city for weeks. Police corruption ring exposed. 12 officers arrested in evidence theft scheme. Internal Affairs sting operation uncovers years of misconduct. The State Police Academy found itself under intense scrutiny. Classes were temporarily suspended as federal investigators descended upon the campus, reviewing records, interviewing staff, and reassessing training protocols. Sergeant Brent was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, though. Her cooperation with Internal Affairs would eventually clear her name. Reyna watched it all unfold from a distance. Rhodes had moved her to a secure location immediately after the arrests, concerned about potential retaliation from officers connected to the corruption ring, but not yet identified. Her days were filled with debriefings, paperwork, and preparation for the upcoming trials. 3 weeks after the sting operation, Reyna was finally allowed to return to her apartment. It felt strange to be back, like stepping into a life that belonged to someone else. She spent the first night reorganizing, cleaning, trying to reclaim the space as her own. A knock at her door the following morning revealed Eric, holding 2 coffee cups and wearing a tentative smile. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her one of the cups. Reyna accepted it gratefully, stepping aside to let him in. "How did you know I was back?" Rhodes told me. "Said you might appreciate a friendly face." They sat at her small kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming through the blinds. For a few minutes, neither spoke, content to sip their coffee and adjust to this new reality. "They're fast-tracking me for detective training," Eric finally said. "With all the vacancies in the department, they need people they can trust." "You deserve it," Reyna replied sincerely. Eric shook his head. "I don't know about that. I almost gave in, you know, when they pressured me to alter those reports. If you hadn't been there..." He trailed off, staring into his coffee. "If you didn't believe in me, I would have quit. You're stronger than you think. So are you." He met her gaze. "What happens now? For you, I mean." It was a question Reyna had been asking herself repeatedly. "I'm not sure yet. There are still debriefings, testimonies. The trials won't start for months." "And after that?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a message from Rhodes. "Meeting at HQ, 2 p.m., decision time. The Internal Affairs headquarters." occupied 2 floors of an unremarkable office building downtown. No signs identified its purpose. Visitors needed clearance and an escort to access the elevators. It was a place designed to protect secrets. Rhodes met Raina in a conference room where maps and photographs covered one wall, the ongoing investigation expanding beyond the initial arrests. "The department is in chaos," he began without preamble. "Recruits, sergeants, even top brass are under investigation. The academy is under federal review. We've only scratched the surface of how deep this goes." Raina studied the wall of evidence. "How many more are involved?" "At least 20, maybe. More. The network extends to 3 other precincts and possibly the DA's office." Rhodes sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Which brings me to why you're here. We need you, Thomas. Full-time, permanent position with internal affairs." The offer wasn't unexpected, but hearing it formally gave Raina pause. She thought of Kyle, of the path that had brought her here. "We need people like you," Rhodes continued. "Brave enough to wear the badge and question it too. This won't be the last corruption scandal, and when the next one comes, we need officers with integrity leading the investigation." "I'm honored," Raina said carefully, "but I need to think about it." Rhodes looked surprised. "I thought this was what you wanted, to finish what your brother started." "It was. It is." Raina struggled to articulate the conflict she felt. "But I didn't become a cop just to police other cops. I wanted to help people before they're failed by the system." That afternoon, Raina drove to the cemetery where her mother was buried. The small plot was well maintained, spring flowers blooming around the simple headstone. Beside it, a newer marker bore Kyle's name. Kneeling in the grass, Raina unclasped the dog tags from around her neck and placed them gently against her brother's stone. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "He didn't die for nothing." A soft breeze rustled the nearby trees, the only answer in the quiet sanctuary. On her way back from the cemetery, Raina's phone rang. The caller ID showed Sergeant Brent's name, the first contact since the operation had been revealed. "Thomas," Brent said when Raina answered. "Got time to meet?" They agreed on a small diner away from police hangouts. Brent was already seated when Raina arrived, looking both tired and relieved. The weight of secrecy finally lifted from her shoulders. "You've caused quite the upheaval," Brent said, as Raina slid into the booth across from her. "Not exactly what I had in mind when I applied to the academy." "No?" Brent raised an eyebrow. "Somehow I think it's exactly what you had in mind." They ordered coffee, the familiar ritual creating a momentary sense of normalcy in their upended lives. "I've been reinstated," Brent announced, "cleared of any wrongdoing and put in charge of rebuilding the academy's training program." "Congratulations." "Don't congratulate me yet. It's a massive undertaking." Brent took a sip of her coffee. "Which is why I need good people. People who understand what went wrong and how to fix it." Raina looked up, sensing where this was leading. "I'm offering you a position," Brent confirmed. "Co-lead a new program to train and screen ethical recruits. Focus on integrity and accountability from day one." "I'm not qualified to be an instructor," Raina objected. "I just graduated." "Sometimes the best teachers are those who've seen the system at its worst and still believe it can be better." Brent leaned forward. "Rhodes told me you're hesitating on his offer. Think about mine instead. At IA, you'd be reacting to corruption after it happens. With me, you could prevent it from taking root in the first place." The idea resonated with something deep in Raina's core, a chance to reshape the institution, from the inside out, to build something better than what had failed her brother. "I'll consider it," she promised. 2 days later, a letter arrived at Raina's apartment. The return address was the county jail where Cole was being held awaiting trial. She almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Inside was a single page of lined paper, covered in neat handwriting. "Thomas, I don't expect forgiveness or understanding. What I did was wrong and I accept the consequences. But there are things you should know. I joined the force because of your brother. He spoke at my high school career day years ago. He talked about integrity, about making a difference. I believed him. wanted to be like him. Then I got to the precinct and saw how things really worked. The corners everyone cut. The deals they made. Little compromises at first, then bigger ones. Before I knew it, I was in too deep to get out. Power changes people. It changed me. I forgot why I wanted the badge in the first place. You never forgot. Even when we mocked you, tried to break you down, you held on to something the rest of us lost along the way. I'm telling Jenkins and the others everything. Names, dates, operations, all of it. Maybe it makes no difference to my sentence, but it feels like the right thing to do. That's something, at least. Cole Rayna read the letter twice before setting it aside. There was no satisfaction in Cole's confession, no sense of triumph. Only the sobering reality of how easily principles could be corrupted, good intentions, twisted. That evening, she called Rhodes and declined his offer. The following morning, she accepted Brent's. 6 months later, the academy reopened with a completely overhauled curriculum. Ethics training was no longer a single-day lecture, but integrated into every aspect of the program. Psychological screening had been enhanced, and a direct line to internal affairs was established for recruits to report concerning behavior. On the first day of classes, Rayna stood beside Brent as new recruits filed into the orientation room. They were a diverse group, more women, more people of color, more varied backgrounds than previous classes. Each face held the same mixture of nervousness and determination that Rayna remembered feeling herself. As the last recruits found their seats, a young black woman approached the sign-in table, her hand shaking slightly as she reached for the pen. Rayna recognized the anxiety in her posture, the uncertainty in her eyes. "You're in the right room," Rayna said, walking over. Relief washed over the recruit's face. "Thank you, ma'am." "Officer Thomas," Rayna corrected gently. "And you are?" "Williams. Andrea Williams." Rayna nodded. "Welcome to the academy, Williams. It's going to be challenging, but worth it." Andrea hesitated, then asked, "Are you the one who took down half the department?" For the first time in months, Rayna smiled without reservation. "No," she replied. "I'm the one who rebuilt it." 1 year after the corruption scandal broke, the State Police Academy stood transformed. The physical buildings remained the same, brick structures arranged around a central yard. But everything else had changed. New leadership, new curriculum, new standards. At the center of this transformation were Sergeant Brent and Officer Rayna Thomas, whose unlikely partnership had bridged the gap between old guard and new vision. Together, they had implemented reforms that were already being adopted by academies across the state. Ethics drills were now conducted alongside physical training. Recruits faced scenarios designed to test not just their tactical knowledge, but their moral compass. Psychological screening had been enhanced to identify warning signs of authoritarianism and power-seeking behavior. Most significantly, cooperation with internal affairs was no longer taught as a betrayal, but as a professional responsibility. On a crisp autumn morning, Rayna watched from the observation room as the latest class performed tactical exercises. Their movements were precise, their teamwork fluid. More importantly, when faced with ethical dilemmas embedded in the scenarios, they consistently chose integrity over expediency. "They're looking good," Eric observed from beside her. Now a detective in the Cyber Investigations Unit, he had returned to give his first guest lecture on digital evidence handling. "Better than we were," Rayna agreed. "Speak for yourself," he teased. "I was perfect." Their friendship had weathered the storm of the scandal, emerging stronger for having faced it together. While their career paths had diverged, they remained each other's most trusted confidant. After the exercises concluded, Rayna met with each squad briefly, offering specific feedback on their performance. She was firm but fair, pushing them to recognize both their strengths and weaknesses. "Officer Thomas," one recruit asked during the debriefing, "is it true you're meeting with the commissioner next week?" News traveled fast, even within the academy's walls. "Yes," Rayna confirmed. "I've been asked to speak at the citywide reform summit." What she didn't mention was that the commissioner had personally requested her participation, describing her as the voice that shook the foundation without shattering it. The summit would bring together law enforcement leaders from across the state, all grappling with the aftermath of the corruption scandal and the reforms it had necessitated. That evening, as Raina prepared her presentation for the summit, her phone rang. It was Rhodes, calling with news that sent her heart racing. "We've completed the final review of your brother's case," he said. "With the testimonies from Cole and the others, plus the evidence we've gathered, we can officially classify his death as a premeditated murder by officers Jenkins and Taylor." Raina sat down, momentarily overwhelmed. "Thank you," she managed. "There's more," Rhodes continued. "We found his personal effects in evidence storage. They were never released to your family because they were considered part of an ongoing investigation. There's a journal, Raina. Kyle was documenting everything." The journal arrived by courier the next morning, a worn leather-bound notebook filled with Kyle's neat handwriting. Page after page detailed his growing awareness of the corruption around him, his attempts to find allies, his increasing isolation as he realized the extent of the problem. The final entry, dated the day before his death, read simply, "Going to IA tomorrow. Can't let this continue. Some things are worth the risk." After reading it cover to cover, Raina made a decision. With permission from Rhodes and the prosecutor's office, she released redacted portions of the journal to the public. Not to name and shame many of those involved were already facing charges, but to create accountability and transparency. "It's not about revenge," she explained when questioned by the media. "It's about learning from the past to build a better future." The journal's publication created another wave of headlines, but this time the focus was different. Rather than sensationalizing the corruption, news outlets began examining the systemic issues that had allowed it to flourish. Discussions about police culture, oversight, and accountability dominated public discourse. In the midst of this renewed attention, Logan Tress resurfaced. Cleared of any wrongdoing due to his role as an undercover agent, he had transferred to another district after the sting operation. Now he requested a meeting with Raina. They met at a park bench overlooking the river, neutral ground away from the memories they shared. "You look good," Logan said, studying her. "The academy suits you." "Thanks." Raina kept her tone professional. "What can I do for you, Tress?" He smiled faintly at her formality. "Just wanted to clear the air. We worked together under unusual circumstances. That's one way to put it. I was hard on you during training," he acknowledged. "Pushed boundaries that shouldn't have been pushed." Raina raised an eyebrow. "You were maintaining your cover." "Yes and no." Logan looked away, watching a boat move slowly downriver. "The truth is I was once as bad as Cole. Thought the badge gave me special privileges, looked the other way when convenient. What changed?" "I got caught," he admitted. "Minor offense, but enough to get IA's attention. They gave me a choice, help them clean house or go down with everyone else." He met her gaze directly. "Then I saw what integrity looked like, in your brother first, and later in you." The revelation settled between them, not quite forgiveness, but something like understanding. Back at the academy, Raina threw herself into mentoring the new recruits. She ran drills with quiet authority, demonstrating techniques rather than simply describing them. Unlike some instructors who relied on shouting and intimidation, Raina led by example, earning respect through competence and fairness. Her approach was particularly effective with female recruits and those from marginalized backgrounds, who saw in her a path forward in a profession that had not always welcomed them. "The hardest part isn't the physical training," she told a struggling recruit one evening. "It's remembering why you're here when everything gets tough." A major news outlet contacted Raina, requesting an in-depth interview about her role in exposing the corruption scandal. The producer promised primetime coverage, a chance to tell her story nationwide. After careful consideration, Raina declined. "I didn't do this for headlines," she explained to a disappointed Brent. "I did it for Kyle." Instead, she channeled her energy into refining the academy's programs, ensuring that each graduating class was better prepared than the last, not just in tactics and procedures, but in the moral courage required to wear the badge with honor. 3 months later, Raina received an unexpected call from the commissioner's office. A ceremony was being planned to update the Academy's Hall of Honor, and Kyle Thomas's name would finally be etched alongside other officers who had died upholding their oath. "Sergeant Brent suggested we surprise you with the announcement during the ceremony," the commissioner's assistant explained. "She thought you might appreciate it." On the day of the ceremony, Raina stood in her dress uniform, watching as new names were added to the memorial wall. When Kyle's name was revealed, she maintained her composure, though her heart swelled with a bittersweet mixture of pride and grief. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, a clerk from the administration office approached her. "Officer Thomas, we found this in the Academy archive during the reorganization. It was marked for you." He handed her a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a letter, the handwriting immediately recognizable as Kyle's. "Raina, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. I've left this with the Academy secretary just in case. Call it paranoia or precaution, but recent events have me concerned. I'm investigating something bigger than I initially realized. I can't put details here, but if I don't make it, promise me you'll keep asking questions, the right ones to the right people. You were always stronger than me, Rai, more stubborn, more principled. I used to tease you about it, but the truth is I've always admired that about you. Don't lose it. The system needs people like you, people who won't bend when it matters most. Make the system remember you. Love always." Kyle. Raina carefully refolded the letter, tucking it into her pocket. After a moment of quiet reflection, she walked to her office in the Academy's administrative wing. On her desk sat 2 objects side by side, her police badge and Kyle's dog tags. She placed her hand over both, feeling the weight of all they represented: sacrifice, justice, the ongoing work of building something worthy of the oath they had both taken. With renewed purpose, she stood and straightened her uniform, ready to face the new cadets waiting in the training yard. "You're not here to look tough," she would tell them as she did every class. "You're here to do what's right, even when no one claps." And in that moment, standing between her past and future, Raina Thomas knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Have you ever wondered what courage looks like when it stands alone against a corrupt system? If Raina's journey of integrity inspired you, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of ordinary heroes facing extraordinary challenges.